Hey guys, Tyler Burger here with Bass Fishing HQ, and today I want to tell you of 5 different ways you can fish a fluke, a soft plastic jerk bait. Stay tuned, it's going to be a good one. As you may or may not know, there is a ton of different ways that you can fish a fluke. Today I'm actually using a Strike King caffeine shad. So when I say fluke, I'm really referring to a soft jerkbait style bait, whether that's like a zoom fluke, a caffeine shad. There's a lot of different types on the market. There's really no one right way to fish this thing. There's a lot of different ways you can fish it. Today I want to show you several ways that I think can be effective and also the situations in which I like to fish it that way. All right guys, the first way that I'm going to fish this fluke is the Seth Fighter way. And if you don't know what I mean, he has a really unique way of fishing a fluke that I find to be extremely effective. He really likes to fish it for smallmouth bass in particularly, but I've actually used this same technique all over the country. I've used it in the Carolinas, where I'm from in Ohio, down in Florida, and I've been able to catch a lot of fish doing it this way. So really, to work this bait, it's pretty unique. The biggest thing is you're actually not twitching the rod. You're actually gonna pull this fluke right below the surface of the water, and it almost looks like you're setting the hook like 15 times in one cast. So basically you're gonna cast that bait out as far as you can. You're gonna let it sit, and then you're simply gonna pull and let it sink for a second, pull and let it sink for a second. And you're gonna just repeat that process all the way back to the boat. I'm telling you what, if you're fishing around spotted bass or smallmouth bass, those bass absolutely get triggered by that extremely fast pull. When you're pulling it real hard and that bait is just darting extremely fast, and then all of a sudden you kill it, bam. That's when those smallmouth, those spots, and largemouth hit that bait. It's an extremely effective way to fish. I like to fish this anytime I'm fishing clear water or smallmouth situations. I fish it up north a lot in places like New York, where I'm really just trying to cover water and try to find bass. Now, one of the most important things to remember when you're fishing this way is that fish most of the time are gonna hit it as soon as you kill that bait. So when you go to swing again, to continue working that bait, and you feel weight, just keep swinging and you're gonna set the hook into that fish. Now, one thing I have noticed about working the bait this way is sometimes you might want to add some sort of stinger hook to your fluke bait that you're using. So I've actually made a video on exactly what I do to do this. So if you click the link above, or I'll put it somewhere in the description, you can actually watch that video on how I rig up a fluke with a stinger hook. Let's get into the next way that I love to fish a fluke, and this is really going to be a fast top water style way of fishing. It's actually kind of similar to the last way that we fished, where we were pulling it subsurface, but in this case I'm actually going to make sure that I'm keeping that bait on the top of the water. If you've ever fished in the Carolinas where they have herring, those spotted bass and largemouth bass absolutely love the herring down there. This is a great way to work a bait if you're from those parts of the country. With that being said, I can absolutely see it work in other places. It just has to be the right situation. A lot of times this is gonna be a summertime bite. It's gonna be a reaction style bite. It's gonna be a way that I like to use it anytime I know the fish are feeding and schooling heavily on shad. I'm gonna cast that bait out just like normal, and I'm gonna keep my rod high. I'm gonna let that fluke literally just skip across the top of the water. And I'm skipping, and then I'll kill it for just a second. Twitch it a couple times, and then I'll skip it across the top of the water and kill it. And I'm gonna do that all the way back to the boat. When that bait is skipping across the top of the water, it triggers big fish, especially like I said, those herring eaters. They're gonna be looking up and they're gonna hear that bait skipping across the water, and you're working it extremely fast. They're gonna be tracking that bait. You're gonna kill it. They're gonna come up and suck it down, and usually you're gonna see a big wake behind your bait right before they hit it. And like I said, this is more of a specific way that I really see working in the Carolinas, but I could see this working anywhere, in ponds, around smallmouth, around largemouth, on other lakes. I do think the water needs to be fairly clear for this to be effective. Just give it a whirl and try it out and see if it works. All right guys, the next way to fish a fluke is definitely something I don't see a lot of people do, but it's basically in replace of a Senko. If you've ever fished a Senko style bait, what you're typically gonna do is you're gonna cast that bait out and you're basically going to let it sink to the bottom. And a Senko has a very unique action as it flutters down to the bottom. That same way of fishing a Senko can also be really effective with fishing a weightless fluke like the one that I have here. This is a very simple way of fishing, but I've seen this work really, really well, and it works for largemouth, it works for smallmouth, it can work for spotted bass. I'm gonna fish this when I'm fishing around visible cover that I can see, whether that's a stump, a rock, or maybe that's even a brush pile. I'm literally gonna cast my bait out to that particular piece of cover, and I'm just gonna let that bait do the work. It's just gonna flutter down. A fluke, depending on what style, whether it's a zoom fluke, a caffeine shad, no matter what brand you have, they're all gonna have a little bit different falls, but just letting that bait fall, I'm telling you what, this is a super effective pond fishing technique. I used to do this all the time back in the day. I would simply run out of Senkos fishing ponds, and I actually found that some days it seemed like they preferred a fluke, because as that fluke shimmies down, it kind of glides a little bit, and I think it just is a little bit different action that bass like, and that not many people are doing it, which is kind of that Senko style way of fishing it, letting that bait just do its own thing, really just kind of dead sticking it. All right, guys, another way that I love to fish a fluke is on a Texas rig, and I actually like to flip it and pitch it. Guys, this is, again, an extremely underutilized technique. I actually learned this from my uncle who fishes in Florida. I don't know if it's just a Florida thing, but I can see this really being effective anywhere across the country, because again, a fluke style bait, a soft jerk bait, has such a natural action to it. So if you put a 1/4 ounce weight, an 1/8 ounce weight, and you flip it and pitch it just like you would a jig, or just like you would a Texas rig stick bait, those fish absolutely will kill that thing. And again, it's something that these fish just don't see a whole lot. They're used to seeing a beaver style bait, a jig, a soft plastic worm, but they're not used to seeing a Texas rigged fluke pitched at them. In Florida, I literally flip and pitch a fluke all the time when I'm down there, and I think that it can work anywhere across the country. If you know that the fish are feeding heavily on shad, but you're catching them with a flipping stick, maybe you're catching them just flipping a jig, when you pull them out of the water, they have a little shad stuck in their throat, start flipping a fluke. It looks just like a shad, it has the same shape, you can match the hatch, and you're still gonna be flipping and pitching. Don't forget to Texas rig a fluke, flip it and pitch it just like you would any other flipping and pitching bait. The 5th way that I fish a fluke is going to be just like everyone fishes a fluke, which is typically just a little bit below the surface, and it's going to be a twitch, twitch, pause, twitch, twitch, pause, twitch, 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 pause. That's kind of the original way to fish a fluke. It's just twitching it right below the surface and letting it just kind of go all over the place and pausing it every now and then. It's still an extremely effective way to catch fish, and it's typically one of the ways that I start fishing when I'm trying to find out if the fish are going to hit a fluke at all. As a bonus, I just wanted to remind you guys that a fluke also works great as a trailer for a number of different type of lures. If you want to put it on the back of a chatterbait, it works fantastic as a chatterbait trailer. Another trailer that it can be is for a scrounger. Guys, a scrounger is another bait it's similar to a chatterbait, but with that being said, it's a lot more subtle. That is another thing. You can put a fluke on a scrounger, whether it's a small scrounger like a 4-inch one, or even a really, really big one like a 1 ounce scrounger. You can use a fluke style bait as a scrounger trailer. Another way you can use it as a trailer is on an underspin. A lot of people like to use a boot style swim bait on a underspin, but simply putting a fluke on there with not much action. This is how we saw Casey Ashley win the Bassmaster Classic, using a small fluke on the back of his underspin, winning $300,000 fishing it that way. So obviously that works well. There's even more ways out there to fish a fluke. So if you wouldn't mind, tell me how you guys fish a fluke. Comment it below if you have a really unique way of fishing a fluke. I'd love to hear. If you guys enjoyed this video, please like it, please comment below, and please subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video.